Live. So let's start with a quick question of the week, which is it's hard to focus on inner peace when you have so much negativity around you. It can be, but it's a matter of focus. You can have complete chaos and turmoil going on all around you. And the thing to understand is that wherever you place your attention, your energy will follow and your consciousness will adjust accordingly. Now, some of this takes a little bit of practice and discipline, you know, but you take a true master and you could put them in prison and they'd be at peace. They'd be more free um, in prison than most people are out in public because they're not conditioned to um, live through the limitations of their mind body if you follow that. But just think of it that way, where you put your attention, your energy will follow, and as a result of that, your level of consciousness will adjust accordingly. So that's how I would handle that one. You can't control all the chaos in the world, but it doesn't mean that you have to focus on it. It doesn't mean that you have to let it define you and limit you in any way. And for the most part, change anything that you do. All right. Good question. So, hello, I'm Howard Mann, creator of Conscious Shifting, and welcome to Conscious Shifting. Everybody take a deep breath way down to that lower energy center just below the belly button and relax. And another big deep breath and relax. And one more time, big deep breath. And relax. All right, everybody feeling good? Before we get started, a quick disclaimer: conscious shifting and all known side effects will improve your physical, mental, and spiritual health while creating the ideal environment for spiritual awakening, helping you live the life of your dreams and influence the world in a positive way. If that sounds good to you, then follow this page, or if you're on YouTube, subscribe, and then join us here for Conscious Shifting. All right, let's see who we have in so far. I see Crystal. Good morning. How you doing? And Susan. Hello, Susan. And Tracy. Hi, Tracy. Kim, of course. All right, so, and there's a few others out there, but let's get started. So, moving beyond dimension, I sometimes receive questions about dimensionality. There's a lot of buzz about dimensions, the fifth dimension and this dimension and that dimension. And so I get these questions. Are we multi-dimensional beings? Or are we transitioning into the fourth dimension? Are we transitioning into the fifth dimension? How many are there? Are dimensions higher level of consciousness? So from time to time, I like to talk about this and try to help clear it up best as possible. First, it's common, excuse me, it's common, especially right now in the world, for language to become this arbitrary thing where, people, especially people in power, tend to just make up whatever a word means for the day. And it may be contrary to what we've all agreed upon for, hundreds or even thousands of years. And it makes conversation difficult because then words become meaningless. And I don't want to get into the politics of the day, but it's low level stuff. But the point is that, language is how we communicate. So you kind of have to have some sort of agreements on what words mean. Otherwise, there's not much point in having a conversation. So when we're talking about dimensions, a lot of people make them out to be all kinds of things. But the general definition of a dimension is a reference point. It comes out of the scientific community, and it has to do with referencing where we are within time and space. So what you can do is, I'm going to give you a few examples before we get into some higher levels of consciousness regarding dimensionality, but we need some sort of a basis to start from. And so let's just imagine that we're in a submarine, and it's going to make these next three examples a lot easier to understand. So we're in a submarine, and we're in a one-dimensional reality. So just imagine, that there's this, maybe a straight cavern or cave or tunnel, and it's barely big enough for our submarine to fit in. So we can only go forwards or backwards. Those are the only two choices that we have. Now, in a one-dimensional reality, we only need one reference point, and that's what this first example is all about. We only need one point of reference to determine where we are in that tunnel. So now just kind of imagine that tunnel is a straight line, and we divide it up into 10 equal parts. And so we can assign each one of those parts a number, a numerical value, 1 through 10. Now, if we move halfway through this cavern, then we would be at reference point 5, right? Directly in the middle. 1 through 10, halfway is 5. So if we tell somebody we're at 5, then they know exactly where we are. So the point of reference in a one-dimensional reality is just that. It's basically just somewhere along a flat line, a straight line, and that's it. There's one point of reference. Now, we can add a second dimension to this. We can move into a two-dimensional reality. Now, picture more of a flat plane, like perhaps the bottom of the ocean. And like a game board from Battleship, for those of you that have ever played Battleship, you have this grid system, and you have numbers going down one side and letters, I think, going across the top, or it might be reversed. But the point is that if I told you E5, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. You go to E, you go to 5, and where they intersect, that's E5. Now that's two reference points, because in a two-dimensional reality, we can move forward and backwards, but we can also move left and right. So you need two coordinates, 2 points of reference in a two-dimensional reality in order to understand, or for someone to know where we are, our longitude and latitude, if you will, our length and width on this flat plane. Let's see if I have any questions yet before I get too far into this. Hi, Tina. Hi, Cheryl. Love, laugh, and be happy in the house. Hi, Kathy. Levels of consciousness. Exactly. Hi, Richard. Thank you, Cheryl. All right, so let's make this really interesting and add a third dimension. So imagine that we're in our submarine and we're just out in the ocean. Now we have 3 reference points. We have the length and width like before, but we've also got height. We need 3 reference points to explain where we are, or understand where we are in this ocean, because we can move forward, we can move backward, we can move left, we can move right, and we can move up and down. So now there's 3 reference points in a 3-dimensional reality. You could have the longitude and latitude, like E5, for example, but that doesn't tell you the depth. So we might be on top of the ocean, we might be on the bottom of the ocean, we might be halfway from the bottom to the top of the ocean. So you also need that depth if you're gonna make reference to where we are in this 3-dimensional time and space. Now, expand our universe or our submarine out into the universe. You could make it a spaceship if you want. And we can call our universe the third dimension because there's three dimensions here. The physical world in which we live is a three-dimensional reality. Or is it? Let's move back to, well, we could just use this universe. And now we're in a spaceship and we're out in the universe. And we can describe the location by our longitude, our latitude, and the depth or the height, So we give these three coordinates. But in order for somebody to find us, they need to know when we were going to be there. So the fourth dimension is actually a dimension of time. Therefore, we could say that we already operate in a four-dimensional reality. This would make us four-dimensional beings, right? We are, in fact, multi-dimensional beings. I'll get into that in a minute. More than four, by the way. But Albert Einstein, a bit of a genius, right? He introduced the idea that time and space are interdependent. So consequently, a lot of scientists will refer to physical reality in which we live as a three-dimensional reality because they see time as being part of this. But if we're really trying to break down dimensionality and try to give these reference points some kind of meaning, then from our basic human perspective, there's four. And now mathematicians are able to come up with equations that go into trillions and trillions of points of reference. And apparently this can be continued as far out as we want to go. The mathematical equation will work. The problem is, what are those references to? You have to assign some kind of meaning. I mean, you can say, oh, there's trillions of dimensions. Okay, well, what exactly does that mean? Well, I don't know. But then it really doesn't mean much, right? There's no way to understand. I don't know. Other than to understand that we don't understand. So if we know the length, the width, the height, and the time, what would be the fifth reference point? Because if we're going to start talking about the fifth dimension, let alone the sixth or the trillionth, then we have to assign some kind of meaning to it. Now, this doesn't mean that they don't exist, right? Hi, Sherry. Hi, Sanir. Welcome. This doesn't necessarily mean that they don't exist. But what would these other dimensions be? What could we reference them to in the physical world? One idea might be bending space-time. If you wanted to do some type of warp speed or time travel or something, maybe there'd be a way to bend space-time. So there would be a lot more points of reference, I'm assuming, in doing that. Otherwise, you'd have a real problem on your hands. Maybe altering gravity. That might require some kind of other reference points in order to pull that one off. But that would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it? To defy gravity. I mean, it would take very little energy to do anything if there wasn't any gravitational pull on it. So another one might be moving through objects. There might be some kind of points of reference that would be required to move through objects. We know that objects are not really solid, that they're actually more space than they are solid matter. So it seems like then we should be able to move through that open space. But exactly how would it be done without disrupting the object we're moving through or becoming part of the object that we're moving through? There could be all kinds of things that went wrong if we weren't able to pull that off. So maybe there'd be some reference points to do something like that. Theoretical physicists have something that they call string theory. And string theory deals with alternate universes. So, as if we don't want to complicate this enough, trying to discuss what other dimensions there might be in this universe, they come up with the idea that there is perhaps trillions upon trillions of universes, and perhaps an infinite number of universes. Another one is this bubble theory. It's kind of like the string theory in a way, but it's like there was the bubble, the universe was created, but then off of the universe, it's almost like there's other bubbles and they just keep forming. And so you have all these alternate universes, these variations that are all being formed, um, perhaps with their own Big Bang and their own realities, something a little different than ours. But these alternate universes, it's been theorized by some of these, cutting edge quantum physicists that it's possible that there are, especially when they start trying to tie this into understanding reality, that there is perhaps infinite universes in which each variable is realized. So every variation you can imagine, they're thinking there might be a universe in which that variation is a reality, and that these are all existing at the same time. And, according to quantum physics, too, it would be all in the same space. So that would require other dimensions. There could be these other universes in the same space that we occupy. It's just that the reference points are such that we're not able to understand it. Our consciousness isn't there, and so we're not there. It gets pretty weird. It does. And for now, it's all interesting stuff to discuss, but it's all theory. Now, there's a lot of people that talk about other dimensions as being higher levels of consciousness. But is consciousness really a dimension? Is consciousness really a point of reference, a measurement of some kind? Because dimensions have to deal with points of reference, which you're dealing with something physical, something that has matter, occupies space and time. And so these coordinates kind of dial you in within those dimensional realities, length, width, height, time, or measurements. They exist in the physical realm. They're of form. They require matter. The matter is what they reference. But is that really consciousness? Is consciousness really part of that? Let's just say that there's a infinite number of alternate universes, and that every possible alternate of our universe and every possible alternate of every other universe, and it just goes on forever. Even if that were true, they would still all exist in the physical realm of form. And because they're of form, they require matter. So dimensions exist in the physical realm. But what about consciousness? Where does consciousness exist? One could easily make the argument that instinct is a function of the mind body. Now, the evolution of ego, we've talked about that. It raised consciousness far above instinct, at least for humans and the higher animals. It is still, however, a function of the mind body. And basic human consciousness is still identified with the mind body. But actual consciousness is consciousness aware of itself being something other than thoughts or emotions, itself being something other than the mind body. So those of you that have begun to spiritually awaken, you know what I'm speaking of. Higher consciousness exists beyond the physical realm of matter, space, and time. Therefore, higher consciousness could not be a dimension. Higher consciousness exists beyond all dimensions. So let me check here for questions. Hi, Donnie. Well, we love having you. Welcome. Hi, Tina. Awesome. Kim says, what? Consciousness has no matter? No, not higher consciousness. If you want to discuss lower levels of consciousness, things like instinct and basic human consciousness, the consciousness that most animals operate at, even the more intelligent ones, those are based, they're of the mind body, they're functions of the mind body, and they're identified with the mind body. So in that case, yeah, there would be, uh you could say that they're physical matter, or at least based on it. I mean, thoughts are energy, so they're not really. Emotions are energy. They're not really matter, like solid matter, like what we think, but they're still of the physical world. Higher consciousness is something completely different. Higher consciousness is beyond all of that. It exists in a realm where there's no time or space, so there's no matter, there's no gravity. It's completely different deal. And that's a huge distinction. That's a huge distinction. So, according to quantum physics, there's this realm that energy exists in where there's no time or space. They don't call it spiritual or anything like that, but they know that it exists. They just don't know really what to think about it. They can't really understand it because without, you know, something that they can physically understand, science is limited. When you move beyond the physical realm, you're moving beyond science, you're moving beyond religion, you're moving beyond thoughts, you're moving beyond emotions, you're moving beyond most of what people consider to be reality. You're moving into something that you really can't explain, because as soon as you start to explain it, you're no longer experiencing it, you're talking about it. And when you're talking about it, that's not it. So that's how difficult it is. I mean, even if you forget about science, just to discuss the spiritual realm is a little out there. Um, but I mean, I would say about, a lot of people at that point will say, well, and therefore it doesn't exist. No, no, and this is actually kind of an interesting point, because what happens is people say, well, I've never experienced it, and they use that as evidence that it doesn't exist. Well, you've probably not experienced a lot of things. It doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means you haven't experienced them. People that have experienced this realm will tell you something completely different. They'll tell you it's just as real, in fact more real, that this is the illusion, that this is the land of make believe. And there's some science to back it up. I mean, think about it. Everything in this world is in a constant state of change. Nothing ever stays the same. So, how can you say there's anything real about it? It's like, well, when you're in a dream, yeah, everything that happens in the dream seems real. But I mean, if it's constantly changing, then it's not really real. So, our understanding is very limited in that sense. Now, when you start talking about the spiritual realm, the realm of higher consciousness, the realm of non-physicality, it always is what it is. It always has been, and it always will be. It never changes. So it is the truth, because it doesn't change. So it is, by definition, ultimately the truth. That's the constant. That's where consciousness exists, in the realm of non-form, non-physicality. So then by definition is eternal. And now you're really starting to talk about this eternal consciousness, this eternal intelligence, this awareness that's aware of itself as being separate from all of this. And how can that not be real? It's the only thing that is real. It's just that we're conditioned to the point to believe something so contrary that when we hear this, it sounds like gobbledygook. But just because you don't understand it, just because you haven't experienced it, just because you've been brainwashed to believe something so entirely different, doesn't make any of this non-truth. And just sitting and having an open, honest discussion about it, you can't help but come to the realization, well, okay, yeah, everything here changes, nothing there changes. So which one's the truth? Which one's the illusion? Before you even start discussing how all this is that it is, I'll do that. I'll make up some props, and we'll get into one of these lives. We'll get into showing what experiments have been done with trying to observe energy as matter versus energy that is non-matter, and how it behaves dependent upon the observer. We'll get into that, but that's all going to be a whole live in and of itself. And yes, everyone does have their own angle or perspective, but it's just opinions. And opinions, as important as they may seem to the person that has it, that's an identification with the ego. And so it is very personal to that person and important to that person. But if they really stop and think about it, it's identification with the mind body. And it's very limited, and it's always subject to change. It's always subject to death by truth. Let's put it that way. Now, that's an interesting point. We probably have many dimensions right here with us, but vibrating at different frequencies, and that's why we don't see them. We don't have the ability to perceive everything. Even the light spectrum that we see is a very small fraction of the total light spectrum. The sound waves that we hear are only a small part of the sound waves that are out there. So we only perceive what we perceive. We only perceive what we're capable of perceiving. And that's because we're in a mind body. And as long as you're in that mind body and you're only listening with the senses that the mind body has, you're only going to perceive reality as the mind body is capable of perceiving it. But energy carries all atoms, I should say, down to the very, molecular makeup of everything in the physical universe. It has its own energy, its own vibes. And so these atoms become molecules. They group together and become molecules, and these molecules, based on the energy of the atom, which is carrying information into the molecule, which creates matter in various forms. And another way of saying that is frequency. So it's almost like you have all these different frequencies, and depending on what frequency you're talking about, it means something. And we can perceive some of that with the mind body, but we can perceive all of it with higher consciousness. It's almost like, think about a radio, and you have radio waves. And if you tune your dial to a certain frequency, you'll pick up that signal, and you'll hear whatever's being broadcast on that signal. Turn to a different frequency, you pick up a different signal, and whatever's being broadcast on that signal. Well, our bodies are only capable of perceiving certain frequencies. That's not all that there is. It's not even close. Deep, deep, deep points and questions. Tracy, it's like you say, everything has already been created. So I think we can literally jump into another version of this. All talk a little bit about that in a moment. Um, yes and no. I mean, yes, it is possible, but our own beliefs and and limitations prevent that from happening. But yes, everything, because there's no time. I mean, time is an illusion. So because there's no time, everything that ever was or will be is right now. And so in that sense, yes, we could literally jump into another version of us. In fact, it's even freakier than that because we already have. We just may not be aware of it. I'll get to that in just a second. Um, so I'll kind of wrap this up, and then we'll do a little bit. We'll do an actual healing circle tonight on the world, kind of utilizing a little bit of this. There may well be an infinite number of universes. Maybe someday we'll visit a different universe, and perhaps in another incarnation, we may actually live in another universe. But for now, all that stuff is basically just theory. It's a lot of what ifs that we don't have the ability to fully scientifically comprehend nor prove, let alone do anything with. Still, we are in fact multidimensional beings. As humans, we operate in a four-dimensional universe, three dimensions of space, and a fourth dimension of time. So just the human mind body is a four-dimensional being. Perhaps someday we'll experience other dimensions. But since we create reality from our level of consciousness, only when our consciousness rises will we experience other dimensions. So you hear all this talk about, oh, I'm transcending into the, 136th dimension. Well, that's a pretty big statement. I'm not even, because you got to understand, these dimensions, and back that up a little bit. Again, since we create reality from our level of consciousness, and that's what I'll get into with that double slit experiment, showing how energy behaves dependent upon the observer. I mean, it doesn't get any weirder than that. But since we create reality from our own level of consciousness, only when consciousness rises will we experience those other dimensions, because then we will be those other dimensions. So you transcend into the fifth dimension by becoming a fifth dimensional being, which is a matter of consciousness. If you were at that level of consciousness, you would be in the fifth dimension, whatever that means. The fact that you're not, the fact that you're not at a fifth dimensional level of consciousness. We have four dimensions, three of space and one of time, because that's where we're at consciously. So dimensions are I'm missing something here. Tracy, okay, that one we're gonna get to a little bit more. Tina, that's what I say. Time is an illusion. People need to chill out when I'm late. Just saying, right? Yeah, yeah, that's it. Kim, we are one, and we are ultimately. Ultimately, we are one. So dimensions are points of reference within the physical realm. Now, there may be, in fact, I'm sure there are, doorways to alternate universes. But different localities within the physical realm are just that, different physical locations, not higher levels of consciousness. And while common consciousness is based in thought, higher levels of consciousness are based, or I should say, are beyond thought, not based in anything. There's no form. So they're beyond thought. Higher consciousness resides in what I call the spiritual realm. And I don't mean Casper the ghost. I just mean this realm that's non physical. So it's like you would imagine spirit. It doesn't have a physical body, nothing, it can move through walls, and nothing physical, none of the laws of science, have any effect on it because it exists as a non physical being. That's what I mean by the spiritual realm. You can think of it as just pure consciousness. Imagine what pure consciousness would be with no body. It's basically spirit, right? I mean, without all the religious overtones and all the woo-woo stuff. But it's basically spirit. So, while common consciousness is based in thought, higher levels of consciousness are beyond thought, existing in this spiritual realm, this formless realm beyond all matter, space, and time. And because higher consciousness isn't physical, it isn't limited by time and space. Now, that has huge ramifications because, in other words, spirit then is, or higher consciousness, however you want to look at it, is what we would call omnipresent. So, what that means is that higher consciousness exists in all times and spaces simultaneously. It's everywhere at all times. That's what omnipresent is. And by definition, anything that exists in this realm of non-form must be omnipresent because there's just this one thing there, and that is non-form. There's no limitations. There's no space. There's no time. There's no matter. There's just consciousness, if you will. So what this means is that on some level, you are conscious to varying degrees in all moments of your life right now. This is where it starts. We make it a little more practical rather than these submarine examples to give you an idea. Now we're moving beyond dimension, beyond the physical realm. What would that mean? It would mean that at least on some level, you're conscious of all moments in your life right now. You're living all your timelines simultaneously, past, present, and future, right now. It must be so. Only the mind body, the way it perceives reality of time and space, the viewpoint of the ego, thinks that there's time and space and there's past, present, and future. But since that is all an illusion, and science agrees here, it's not just that spiritual teachers for 5,000 years have been saying this. Cutting edge quantum physics says this. You see how things are starting to come together in the ultimate truth? We are transcending into higher states of consciousness. So we will be transcending into probably some other dimensions as well. But right now, just to try to, get some bearing on what that means, it's that you're living all of your timelines, past, present, and future, right now. It's all happening at the same time. You think back in your life when you were 2 years old or 7 years old or 15 years old. Think about your future when you're 80 years old. They're all happening right now, and you're experiencing them because your consciousness is not limited by time. Your consciousness is the constant in the whole thing. Your spirit is the constant in the whole thing. You've been in each one of those moments living through that mind body, and you still are right now in all those moments. I know, but uh, if you open your mind Forget about what you've been brainwashed into believing and just think about what that means, a realm of non-form, non-time, and non-space. Then it must mean this. It can't mean anything else. Not even getting into spiritual philosophy or any of that. Just the science actually takes us, our physical science actually takes us to the edge of the physical reality. And we get a glimpse of spiritual reality. We can begin to understand beyond the intellect with the intellect, but that's where it stops. To go any further, you have to experience it. You have to actually become higher consciousness and just simply experience it. There's no other way to do it. But for that matter, it's not just that we're experiencing all of our timelines in this lifetime. Let's say that it takes you 1,000 lifetimes to spiritually awaken, which is why we come here. If we want to break it up into fragments, like we tend to see everything being in a mind body, the viewpoint of the ego, we're going to break up all these moments. Well, then it's not just that we have moments in this lifetime, all these timelines in this lifetime, but we actually have multiple lifetimes. Let's say there's 1,000 of them. Then that means that you're living all of your timelines in all of your lifetimes right now. You get that one? It's all happening right now. You could be a caveman or woman, you could be some advanced extraterrestrial on another planet far into the future. But you're living both of those and everything in between all right now. Every moment of those lifetimes, every timeline within those lifetimes, and all of the other ones, all right now. So yeah, are there other dimensions? Well, yeah, I would guess so. I would guess so. But we're we're actually beyond all that, which is exactly why we can be in all of these dimensions all at the same time. Hence the word multidimensional being. The fact that we're spirit and non-physical is exactly, because then we're not, in essence, we're spirit, we're not limited by time. We don't have that limitation. So we are experiencing, whether we're aware of it or not, all of those timelines in all of those lifetimes. And since ultimately we're all one spirit, what that would mean is that you're living all the timelines in all the lifetimes that everybody has, that all beings on earth and elsewhere are having, all of their lifetimes and all the timelines within those lifetimes. Because we're all one spirit, one consciousness, you're experiencing and living all of that right now. You may not be aware of it. I doubt you are. Then you got to do a live about it. I'd be real interested in hearing it. Because it's just, all I can say is awesome sauce, right? Awesome sauce. This stuff is just, and yet it must be. It can't be any other way. Because if it were any other way, then none of this would even exist. We wouldn't be here having this conversation. And I think we'll all agree that we're here having this conversation. All these tools, all these things that we talk about with conscious shifting all work. They improve your physical, mental, and spiritual health. The evidence is in the fact that they work. If it weren't so, it wouldn't work. The healing wouldn't take place. The enlightenment wouldn't happen. In fact, we wouldn't, like I said, we wouldn't even be here. If all this isn't so, we wouldn't even be here. We couldn't be. Something to think about. Tracy, oh man, I know, huh? Kim says, why is the illusion so real? Because we believe it to be so. That's the mistake that we've made. It's spiritual amnesia. It's forgetting who and what you are and living a false life based on a false identity because you identify with the ego and its viewpoint. And so it seems very real. It seems like it's the only reality, but it's all a lie. It's all bullshit, folks. All of it. All of it. Maybe that's why I'm grumpy sometimes. Yes, in fact, because when on some level you are conscious of your higher self, on some level you understand the reality, the truth, and yet you're living something that's not the truth that causes inner conflict. And that inner conflict you experience as pain, and that manifests itself in grumpiness, hostilities, etc. So yes, it's in a way a recognition that something funny is going on around here, that this is not at all what it appears to be, and I'm living a lie, and that creates inner conflict. And so you have two choices. You either let that go where it's going to lead you. You listen to spirit, let spirit guide you, or you reject it. You go into a state of denial, go back into the subconscious mind, and create even more of a falsehood and more garbage that you're going to have to live through eventually. Eventually, you must, because you cannot forever deny who and what you are. It's not going to happen. Everyone's going to awaken. I mean, they will. Susan, mind blowing. I know. I know. Tina, so this is proof there is no literal hell. Yes. Well, I mean, not permanent anyway. And not a hell that some horned beast is creating. The evil that you see in the world is not caused by Satan. And we're not going to hell, after we die. We're already in hell. But that is simply a state of consciousness. It's a very low level state of consciousness. The evil that you see in the world is man created. It has nothing to do with the devil or Satan or dark spirits or any of that. That's all nonsense. The evil that you see in the world is caused by extreme identification with ego. And I'll get into that some night. That it gets into some deep stuff, because what you're really doing is rather than experiencing creation, you're judging creation. You're basically saying that ego knows better than the creator. Ego knows better than supreme consciousness. If you will, ego knows better than God. And ego actually hates God, because God is something that ego can never be, which is higher consciousness. Ego is a very primitive level of consciousness and a very limited identity. It's not even real. But that gets into some really heavy stuff, because we all of us combined make up that consciousness, God, the great spirit, whatever you want to call it. Then that hatred actually equates to self-hatred, which explains why there's all this violence and evil and ill wishes projected onto the world and people in the world, lashing out at, whoever, some politician or something, because, it's projecting that which is within out. So again, we create this reality. If we were all operating at higher levels of consciousness, we'd be creating heaven on earth, because that's also a state of consciousness. But the proof is that we're operating at low levels of consciousness, because low levels of consciousness deal with negative emotions, which is the pain when we buy into this illusion that we're separate from each other and we're separate from God. And, and so we create this hell. All the problems that exist only exist because we bought into the belief in separation. That's the fall from grace. That's where we messed up. We came into this world to express higher consciousness, created this universe as a means of doing so, created these, mind bodies in which we could inhabit just so we could express higher consciousness. But then started identifying with the mind body and with this reality as if it was reality and if this mind body was who we were, actually preventing us from expressing the higher consciousness, which is the reason that we came here in the first place. So you have the consciousness of heaven and the consciousness of hell. And you identify with the ego or you identify with spirit. Most people somewhere in between. Or they go back and forth from moment to moment. But yes, there is no literal hell, and that it's a place of eternal torment by some vengeful God that's pissed off because, we didn't do things exactly the way he wanted them to do. That is not higher consciousness. That is the ego projecting low-level nonsense onto supreme consciousness to try to separate you further from it. You see? You see? Oh, it gets deep and quickly. Tracy, I think that all possibilities at the same time, too. Yes. People often fear the unknown. You start talking about something they're not familiar with, they start getting scared. Like, this conversation will freak out really devout religious people, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But think of it this way: in the unknown lies all of the possibilities. In the unknown lies all of the potential. This is the known. What we have going on right now is the known. Lower consciousness, we know all about. The answers are in higher consciousness, which for most people is very much of an unknown. Hard to fathom. I guess well, if any of us were completely there, we wouldn't be here, right? And this reality would not be, what we were creating. Hey, Chris, how's it going? Tina, yeah, I can get lost in thinking how we did come about, and with what you say, we are really not here. Not the way we understand it. We are. We're actually one being. But, our perception is something different, isn't it? And our beliefs are something different. And we run around, you listen to the news, and you listen to politicians, and you listen to people in positions of authority, and and everywhere you look, and they've all been brainwashed too. I mean, I'm not trying to lay it all on them. They're, um, temporarily at least, poor unfortunate souls. Look at it that way. They but the point is that we run around spewing this stuff like we know what we're talking about when we don't, and we just continue the nonsense. Um, which is why I might talk about some world events or politics from a spiritual perspective, but I never really get into picking sides and get into the politics of it, because it's low level stuff. And the answer is high level stuff. You know what I mean? You could be more or less evil. Well, shit, that doesn't really cut it for me. How about we just skip the evil altogether and move right on to bliss? How about that one? How about love? Can we just go there? So that's what I try and work with, or allow to work through me. Let's put it that way. I not being this, but identification with spirit and allowing that to do the talking, allowing that to guide the conversation, allowing that to come through. Kim, and trauma. Any situation that lacks love causes trauma. And there you go. The belief in the separation from God. Because another way to describe God is unconditional love. You believe that you've separated from that, that you're separate from that, and you behave accordingly and project that onto the world. And you have pain and emotional trauma. And we just keep bouncing it back and forth off of each other. Hi, Mary. How you doing? Hi, Melissa. Yes, embracing your imagination and subconscious is surrendering. That's it. Doing the work does help you soothe your ego. Exactly. It's not all bad, but if you're identify with it, you become a tool of the ego rather than using the ego as a tool, a viewpoint to operate in this time-space continuum while still understanding that you're a spiritual being. See, that's the difference. You still happen to be temporarily in the human condition, but you understand that you're a spiritual being. If you just get that, everything else will come, and it'll come a lot easier. Tracy, ego would think he's the greatest and knows everything. Indeed. Ego would rather rule over hell. Exactly. Ego would rather rule over hell than accept higher realities. It really can't. It's beyond it. You know, like there's just limitations. Science, religion, ego, politics, they're all limited, you know, in the sense that they're all of the physical world. And the physical world is like a sub-reality of higher realities. But you can't experience those higher realities while still identifying with the lower realities, you know. Lower consciousness will only create things of lower consciousness. To step into higher states of being, you have to move into higher states of consciousness, and then the creation, the reality will reflect that. It's like a vibe, you know, when you got a room where it's like pretty wonky, and somebody walks in that's just a really bright, happy soul, and all of a sudden the energy in the room starts changing. It's like that, you know, when enough of us are doing it, and other people will start joining, and pretty soon the collective consciousness will rise and the reality of this place will shift. That's how it's going to happen. That's how we will create heaven on earth. That's what Jesus was talking about when he said, "These things I do, you too shall do, and even greater." That's what he was talking about. He saw it. Melissa, the more you deny your imagination and ground them into an implicit memory is what forms your opinions and biases. Yep, that's right. It's all memory based, all known stuff you've experienced and stored from a particular perspective. That implicit memory can trigger an explicit memory, which creates a false confirmation. Exactly. So, in other words, you have this memory, and it's implanted down, programmed down in your subconscious somewhere, and you get around. It could be anything really. It could be someone says or does something, or a smell or a sight or a sound that reminds you of that. And the more this kind of stuff happens, the stronger that belief becomes. And so you see all that as evidence and confirmation when it's not necessarily the case. Good point. You like that, Tina? I'm glad you guys are getting this and you like it. And yes, it does get deep. Hi, Deanna. How you doing? Always in our prayers. I don't know if you're aware of it and if you feel it when it's going on, but you get healings on a regular basis. You do. So this is not matching the, oh boy, there's some dimensionality shifting going on here. All right, so let's move on to a healing circle. But first, I would just finish this up by saying, what we can do right here and right now is learn to be fully present. Like when what we were talking about with the I think was it Melissa was talking about the memories. I don't see the comments now. It's back there. Yes, yes. So when you think about that, you're thinking about the future. You're anxious. Your imagination, all the possibilities. You're freaking out on what could happen, or the past. It's based on a memory. And maybe something in the past happened that you didn't like, and so you're projecting that into the future. But it's all memory based. If you just learn to be present, then all of that just kind of dissipates, and you experience this moment as the miracle that it is. So, what we can do right now is learn to be here now, and while present, we can connect with our spiritual essence. You have to be present to do that, and then that makes it possible to learn to live as spirit while in physical form. And that's mastering spirituality. And as spiritual masters, we'll be at peace with our surroundings. It's one of the signs of a master. There's this peace that comes over them because they are in harmony with all that is. There's no resistance. There's no judgments. They're experiencing creation rather than judging creation. And understand that everything's exactly the way it should be and that we're all part of it. And there's this natural thing going on, this natural evolution, higher and higher states of consciousness. So as spiritual masters, then we'll be at peace with our surroundings, regardless of what universe, what dimension, what timeline, or what lifetime we may find ourselves in. One of the few, one of the many, I should say, one of the many advantages of being a spiritual master, a true master, you're at peace no matter what, no matter what's happening, no matter where you are. So there it is, moving beyond dimensionality. Now let's move on to, let me put this up. We'll do a quick healing circle here. Show this. There we go. All right. So everybody gather around, nice, comfortable, upright position. Form a circle. Join hands. Gently close your eyes and mouth. That's it. Everybody in. Nice circle. Everyone holding hands. Eyes and mouths gently closed. Breathing through the nose down to the lower energy center just below the belly button. And then exhale back out through the nose. And again, a non-forceful but a deep breath way down. And then exhale back out through the nose. So you can breathe in peace. And then exhale all tension. Breathe in healing energy. Breathe in divine energy. And then exhale all disease. Breathe in peace. and exhale all remaining tension. Any troublesome thoughts, anything you don't want to hold on to, let it go out with the breath. Then settle into the relaxation. So the mind, continue breathing on your own. The mind breathes, or the mind breathes. The mind thinks and the body feels. The thoughts and emotions have their own energy. And that can be perceived as vibe. Within that vibe is information carried by the energy. And this information that's being carried by the energy influences reality. So shifting into higher consciousness creates a higher reality. So for this circle tonight, let's visualize planet Earth in the middle of our healing circle. Now, visualize a world without pain or oppression of any kind. Just think about that. There's Mother Earth gently spinning in the middle of our healing circle, but a little bit different tonight because there's no pain, there's no oppression of anyone anywhere on the planet. It does not exist within our consciousness. There's no war, there's no poverty, there's no starvation, there's no sickness, there's no disease. They don't exist. They are falsehoods. Just people living in peace. That's all. People loving one another. That's the state of this planet. When we hold it in this level of consciousness, that's what it will become. That's what it can be. And we can influence that in the healing circle. We can send that vibe into the planet and into the hearts and minds of all the people on the planet. That energy can be projected. Just as somebody walking into a room that's got a really bright spirit and a big smile can change the energy of the room, we can change the energy of the planet, or at least influence it. So, no pain, no oppression, no war, no poverty, no starvation, no sickness, no disease, just peace and love. That's all. Project this vibe to our planet and all of its inhabitants. Breathe in higher consciousness and gently exhale peace onto the world. Breathe in higher consciousness and gently exhale peace onto the world. Breathe in higher consciousness and gently exhale peace onto the world. And so it is. All right, slowly open your eyes. And if you have any last minute questions, go ahead and put them in the comment box. And then we will call it a night. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Always, Deanna. Always. Part of my routine now. Hi, Carol. How you doing? Melissa says cognitive dissonance is normal within grieving losses of attachments. I think we forget that and are quick to judge. Yes, yes. And you never know what someone's dealing with. So, we tend to go, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. You're not professional, you're not respecting me. You blew it, you messed up, you cost me time, you cost me money, whatever. But you don't know what they're dealing with. I mean, you don't. They could have just had the worst day of their life, and it was everything for them to show up. Everything for them to show up. And yet there they are, and they're trying. So, a little bit of kindness goes a long ways. Um, and even if it's not the worst day of their life, and even if some of that stuff is true, there's obviously something going on. And so kindness will help regardless. Never the wrong time to be kind. It's just not. I don't know why. I should be, as far as I know, everything's working good. I haven't, since I switched to this Be Live platform, I haven't had that problem. Mary, saying we're freezing. Okay. And so it is. Thank you all. Good. I'm glad that helped. Good night, Deanna. Sweet dreams. Kim's reminding everybody to drink water. You want to stay hydrated when you do energy work. The energy works much better that way. And it's just generally healthier to stay hydrated. All right. And so it is. I honor the God within you. And remember, until the next time, the only way to bring about the greater good is to be the greater good. Good night.